Tate Chronicles now transmitting.
Welcome to the Tate Chronicles on Healthcare Now Radio. And now, here's your host, Jim Tate.
Good day, citizens of the free world. From border to border, coast to coast, and to all that ships at sea, I bring you a warm welcome. This is your correspondent, Jim Tate, and thank you for tuning in today to the Tate Chronicles. Join me as we cut through the fog that exists at the leading edge of healthcare technology. I'm really pleased. My guest today is Robin Hill. Robin is the Chief Clinical Officer at Vivify. Vivify's health's mission is the transformation of healthcare by replacing episodic approaches with the market's most complete, patient-centered, and holistic connected care platform. Robin is a registered nurse with over 30 years of healthcare experience, which includes acute as well as post-acute care. Her last 12 years have been focused on healthcare IT in both those spaces. Robin, welcome to the Tate Chronicles.
Thank you, Jim. Glad to be here.
Yeah, you and I have a very similar background, Robin. We both were involved in direct patient care for a period of time. Then we both got into the health IT space, so we have that in common. But I'd like to start by you telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got into healthcare, and a little bit about Vivify Health.
Glad to. Thanks, Jim. So I have been I started out in the hospital setting, and I am a registered nurse, and I worked many years in the emergency department. And most of my career was in the emergency department, and towards the latter part of my career in the emergency department, I was implementing technology to help support my staff and improve turnaround times and outcomes of the patients that we were treating in the emergency department. And that's where I kind of got the healthcare IT bug. I implemented a large emergency department information system in our emergency department, and then went to work for the company that we implemented, and that was MedHost. So really have enjoyed using my clinical knowledge fused with technology to really develop software and solutions to help support the care team that's providing care directly to the patients through our product. So I worked for MedHost in their, I was over their clinical analysts and educators, and then went over on the product side. And then when our CEO and founder, Eric Rock, formed Vivify back in 2009, I knew that I would want to go work at Vivify Health eventually, and I came on when it became commercialized, and have been working at Vivify since it was launched. And I am over the clinical team here at the company, which includes clinical consultants that work directly with our customers on optimizing their programs using our software and understanding all the rich features and functionality of the software. I also have a team of clinical analysts that have their masters in informatics that build out our evidence-based content for all of our different programs. I also lead a team of product owners and managers, and work closely with the development team on implementing new features and functionality. And then I also have configuration analysts and educators. So have a very deep bench of clinical teams that help support the product. And so, as I mentioned, I've been with Vivify since we commercialized it, and we've really enjoyed the journey on helping our organizations, our customers, help manage their patients and or members remotely. We started out in really targeting healthcare systems that were managing their tip of the pyramid on risk. So those high-risk patients that typically have like heart failure, COPD, diabetes, hypertension, and that are costing those organizations, money as far as readmissions. And so over the years, though, we've expanded our reach to include working with home health agencies, ACOs, providers, payers, basically any any organization or customer that has the need to stay connected with their members or patients in their home as they're managing their health or any, whether that's an acute condition or a chronic condition.
The whole concept, Robin, of whether we call it virtual care, remote care, or remote monitoring, it seemed to get its initial boost, as you mentioned, around patients being discharged from the hospital with a diagnosis of congestive heart failure or something similar to that, some type of chronic condition. And the drive was to make sure those patients were not readmitted, typically within 30 days. And so then we had the gigantic boost of, I guess, what's called telehealth, where during the COVID crisis, patients were not come in for any kind of visits whatsoever to see their physicians, and providers had to start using some type of technology to do virtual encounters with their patients. But there are a lot of different settings in which remote monitoring and care take place outside these episodic visits. So let's talk, maybe you can give some examples of the different kind of settings where this type of, whether we call it remote or virtual care or monitoring, can take place.
Yeah, so the majority of our customers today are managing their population or their members or patients in their home. And so these are patients, like you had mentioned, typically for our healthcare systems, these are patients that have had an acute episode and they're being discharged home, whether that's home with home needs or just going directly home. We have customers that are also using our solution directly out of an ED visit where they've been evaluating the emergency department, and instead of being admitted, are being discharged directly from the ED back to home. Any time that you want to put your eyes on a patient or have data back on that patient to evaluate, are they trending in a positive manner? Those are situations where, using virtual care or remote care technology really helps support the clinical team. We aren't so much in nursing homes or skilled nursing facilities at this time, but that's always a possibility as well to use our solution in those kind of settings.
It's amazing how this is starting to pop up different places, this remote monitoring, even for folks that are well. I went to our neighborhood gym recently, or once it reopened after the COVID protocols changed. And when you walked in, you would step up to a device that would check your temperature. You raise your forearm or put your forehead near the device, and it turned green if you didn't have a temp, and red if you did have a temp. And so that is remote biometric monitoring just, by itself. It's amazing how it's starting to work its way into just daily exposure just as we walk around. So I don't know if you've experienced that. Certainly airports during the peak of the COVID crisis, were monitoring everybody's temperature when they walk through with devices. So kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when COVID hit and in the first quarter of last year, mainly around February, March, our team quickly created a COVID-19 screening and monitoring program. And we've had tens of thousands, if not 100,000 plus employees and patients go through the program at this point. A lot of our hospital systems were enrolling their own employees into the program to make sure that they were not symptomatic, which would then expose others to the possibility of them being positive for COVID. So we quickly built out the program based on CDC guidelines, and whenever CDC updated their guidelines, we were able to publish the updated guidelines through our program, and we've definitely had a lot of, I'd say 85 to 90% of our customer base use that program to help manage not only their employees but their patients. And part of that was on the monitoring side, part of that, and on the screening side was taking your temperature as one of the biometric data points that was being measured.
In the traditional remote monitoring that's being done, whether it's in people's homes or in skilled nursing facilities or places like that, what type of data is being gathered? I imagine some of it's biometric, some of it may be patient-generated, a patient saying if their pain is 0 to 10 or how how they feel, something like that. But what are the different types? We mentioned temperature. What other types of data are being gathered?
Yeah, good question. So it's dependent on the condition and or conditions that patient is managing. What we see more often than not, these patients are comorbid, meaning they have more than one disease process or condition that they're managing. And so, for instance, as an example, somebody may have diabetes and heart failure. We're able to capture their weight, their blood pressure, their oxygen saturation, their heart rate, their blood glucose levels, and all that can be captured via Bluetooth connected devices that communicate directly to a tablet or to their phone if they use our Go solution. We have different technology models based on the customer's needs. And so we have what's called a home kit, which includes a 4G connected tablet that also has paired Bluetooth biometric devices to that tablet. So simply the patient would step on their scale and that patient's weight would communicate back to the tablet, then is sent back to the clinical team's platform that they review the data. But it's more than just capturing metric data. It's also capturing subjective data, so triaging the patients for symptoms they may be experiencing. And I always say it's a two-way street. So I, as the nurse, want to get this rich data, but I also have the opportunity through our software to educate the patient along the way. So we're really treating them holistically. We're able to continuously educate them on anything from medication management to, their specific conditions that they're managing. They're able to watch videos. We have customers using our product today for pre and post-surgical procedures. So we're able to educate the patient prior to their surgical intervention, such as exercises they may need to be working on for like a hip or a knee replacement, and being able to really understand the full amount of information that they need to know prior to their surgical intervention, so that in the rehab period, they're much more successful with their rehabilitation process by being that educated. So those are just different, being able to do virtual visits, being able for me to put my eyes on that patient, to further assess them, to provide them not only physical support of their condition, but behavioral, social determinants of health we can also assess through our product. So it really is more than just capturing biometric data. It's really looking at that patient holistically and supporting them in every aspect of their care.
One thing you mentioned there right at the end, Robin, that social determinants of health, there is a big difference in seeing a patient in your office as opposed to seeing them in their home environment. The issues around them and what their home life is like. You mentioned hip replacements. I was kind of shocked the other day. I knew a friend of mine was going for a hip replacement. She had it done in the morning. She was sent home in the afternoon after a hip replacement. I didn't believe it at first, but it was true. Of course, anytime you have anything done like that, the only people who should ever be in a hospital are people who have to be in a hospital because things can happen in a hospital. I just hope that there is some type of, human/electronic communication going on to whether it's the ability to remotely look at a wound site or just, making sure a patient's getting up and moving around or sharing exercises with them. So,
Yeah.
if there's not that, then recovery is definitely going to take a lot longer. No doubt about that.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned the human side. So although we're in the healthcare IT realm, it's still not a replacement for that human factor. Patients want to know that there is somebody behind that screen watching out for them and not just the technology itself. So I always say people, processes, and product all three of those are important, but the most important is that human factor, that people factor, and the patient knowing that there is somebody looking out for them and being that little, extra eyes on how they're managing their health in their home.
I was on the Vivify website yesterday, a lot of good blog posts there, but I also ran across something that's called the Vivify Pathway Maps. That includes 6 different steps. Could you tell us a little bit about what those pathway maps involve and what are the 6 steps? Pathways
is the name we give to the programs that we have available in our product, and we have a large volume of programs that our customers have access to. And when our programs are developed, as I mentioned, we work with a team of nurses that have their focus 100% on research and development of content for these programs. And we have a governance board that our content goes through medical review and privacy legal review as well. So these are very thought out and built programs. But as we're building these programs or the pathways, we're always thinking about the patients as the end users and making that as digestible, actionable, and, understand, written in the language of the patient and not necessarily somebody in healthcare IT. Those are different steps that we go through to make sure that we are building out engaging content so that the patients really do benefit from coming to the technology to not only provide the clinical team information, but also to receive information through the digital format as well. And certain steps that we make sure that we are hitting so that we meet those metrics.
Speaking of metrics and also statistics, are we starting to get any valid chronological statistics that really demonstrate a return on investment, that this type of remote care or remote monitoring really does reduce hospital readmission or ED visits when remote patient monitoring is properly used?
Absolutely. We definitely track that. We know our customers track that closely. So pretty much across the board, most of our customers are realizing anywhere from a 50 to 65% reduction in readmissions or admissions. So that translates into a positive ROI or return on their investment. Also, other metrics that translate into ROI is especially in the home health world, where you can decrease in-home visits because that clinical oversight is now being done through the monitoring team through our digital products. And so less nurse in-home visits, which then allows that agency to expand their reach and have more patients that they can manage at one time. So decreased visits in the home, decreased ED visits, decreased inpatient visits are all part of, the metrics that we monitor to make sure that the patients or the customers are getting an ROI on our product. And then on top of that, just patient satisfaction is another key metric that our customers manage. And we have the ability through the software to digitally ask the patient how they're liking the program. A lot of our customers today ask that, especially if they're on a long-term program, more than 30, 60, or 90 days, they can send out a questionnaire and query that patient to see, are they truly receiving the satisfaction level that you're wanting to achieve with those patients. And if they're not, then you have the opportunity to course correct and get them back to a more satisfactory level. But across the board, we have very high satisfaction rates, 95, 97%. And that translates into compliance rates or engagement rates. So we have high 80s, low 90s on compliance. And that means that the patients are coming to the program on their prescribed day and completing their program, so that the clinical team has that data to then measure how that patient is progressing.
And as that data comes in, rather than just nonstop streaming, are there alerts set up? So if a patient has a diagnosis of congestive heart failure, can you set up an alert? So if they gain 2 pounds in 1 day or 3 pounds in 2 days, an alert pops up? Are there built alert capability?
Yeah, we have our cloud-based platform, which is called our Pathways Portal, is the tool or the software that the clinical team uses. And as soon as when the nurse logs into that program or into that platform, they're immediately presented a panel of patients that have data that has presented or that has fallen out of bounds, or their parameters have been exceeded. And so that nurse basically can quickly scan through her list to see who needs attention today. And it may not require an outreach. It's more about the tracking and trending in that data over days than it is for a specific data point for that day. So that nurse can use her clinical or his clinical judgment to, and based on your escalation processes as well, determining who needs an interaction that day. But yes, we do have a panel or a dashboard that the nurses can quickly see if blood pressure parameters have been exceeded, if they've gained 3 pounds in 24 hours. There are alerts that present back on the panel. And we have what's called medium and high alerts based on, the data that has come back in.
The concept of that, I guess, lack of a better phrase, just the electronic or machine capability to do that type of triage of the data saves a lot of time, certainly for the clinicians. We only have about 3 or 4 more minutes, so I always like to ask this question for people in your position, Robin. What does the future of remote care look like? Where do you think we might be in 5 years?
Well, I can tell you COVID really changed the future of remote care. I think, if there is a good thing about COVID, I don't know if there is, but being able to provide virtual care really was highlighted in these last, 15, 16 months. And so I see the future. I see remote care being more of a standard of practice and not so much a nice to. I think prior to 2020, it hadn't reached the level of interest as it has in the last 15 or so months. So I think that more and more organizations such as healthcare system providers, payers, will look to remote care as to augment their current practice.
And last but not least, if our listeners want to perhaps get a demo or just find out more about Vivify Health, where can they go to find out that information?
Go to our website. It's VivifyHealth.com. And you can go to, there's a contact me section at the bottom of our homepage there that they can submit a request for further information or to meet with the Vivify team.
Okay, great. Well, we're totally run out of time. To our audience, thanks for join us on this episode of the Tate Chronicles. I offer a special salute to my guest today, Robin Hill of Vivify Health. Robin, thanks for coming aboard today.
Thank you very much, Jim. It's my pleasure.
You can find more information on this show's program page at healthcarenowradio.com. Until we meet again, here's wishing you smooth sailing and safe harbors.
Tate Chronicles transmission ending now.